Carolyn Doobie here. What's the play for today? Well, today I'm thrilled to share with you my latest stencil over at StencilGirl Products. This is an ATC stencil, and this has got 9 designs on it in one stencil. Plus, you're also going to get the masks of these ladies and of these paint drips. So those are these little guys. You get those included too. Now you can keep everything as one big stencil, or if you like it, you can break it apart, cut it apart, and end up with 9 different little stencils. Now, if you've never cut stencils apart, if you haven't done that before and you want me to walk you through that step by step, I've got that at the very end of this video. I will tell you that scissors, paper cutter easily cut through these so that you can chop it up so that you have as many of these little individual pieces as you want. Now in this video, you're going to see how I play around with these. I'm going to share with you ways to use them as repeating patterns, to put multiple colors into a repeating pattern, and I'll even share with you one of the cool secret tricks about this stencil and how you can use it to create unlimited kinds of patterns. I'm going to start out with the paint drips. I've got a piece of book text there, and I've got it positioned up near the top, and then I'm just going to pounce some acrylic paint all over it. And when I lift the stencil up, what I'm going to have are these wonderful pink drips heading down part of the page. But I'd like my drips to go all the way across the page, which when I lift this up, you're going to see that it's only going about half the way. Now this is a stencil, so if it's only going half the way, I can move it the rest of the way on the page by simply stenciling it again. I'm very loosely going to line up the drips. And when I stencil the paint on here, what it's going to do is create a slightly larger or different shape on that overlapping drip that's happened to be part of the first stenciling and the second stenciling. And once I lift up the stencil, nobody's going to know that those drips did not perfectly align because it's just going to look like a bunch of loose, free, fun drips happening all from the top of the page. And you bet you can do as large of a page as you want with these or as small of a page. Well, let's play around with the butterfly now. As I'm doing this, I'm realizing this would make a great element for a card, but I might want to tuck it on my art journal page too. So just because these are called ATC stencils doesn't mean you can only use them for ATCs. Next, let's play around with the alternating diamond stencil. Now this one is great because you can line it up again and continue the pattern on without any measuring, without any worrying about keeping things straight or even. If you simply line the pattern up, that will keep it all even and where it needs to go. As I'm going through here on the middle of the page with this, what about those little bits on the end? What about those sides? Well, guess what? All I'm going to do is the same kind of thing. I'm going to line up the stencil and then stencil in the remaining parts. So not only can this stencil fill any size that you want it to, it can also become 2 colors really easily. I've let the blue dry, and now what I'm going to do is put the stencil right back on here as if I was going to stencil the blue. Then I'm going to slide it down 1 row, or you can also slide it up 1 row. Either way, but when you slide it, what you want to see is just the book text or the plain paper underneath it. You don't want to see any of the blue, because now when I come in and stencil, what I'm going to be stenciling is everything but the blue. Of course, I did manage to pick up a little bit of that teal on my cosmetic sponge, but that's okay. It'll just add a little variation with now a little touch of green from mixing with the yellow up there. And so the same process is going to repeat just like what we did with the blue, except this time I'm doing it with the yellow. As you're stenciling, if you want to have a crisper image, a couple of things you can do to help yourself with that. One of them is to make sure you're pouncing with the sponge in an up and down motion. Another thing is to use the smallest amount of paint possible because there's less paint to run underneath. And then the last thing is to use a thicker paint rather than a real juicy wet fluid one. So now that you know how to get 2 colors onto that pattern, I'm going to show you a trick using these circles. For the last stencil you saw putting the stencil on, simply sliding it down and stenciling it again. But with this one, the way I designed those 3 lines allows you a lot more flexibility because I'm not going to go straight down. I'm going to mix up the pattern here. I'm only going to put 2 of the lines lining up there, not 3 of them, just 2 of them. So those 2 little ends there, the straight lines sticking out, Well, that's what I lined up to the line that was already stenciled. That way I knew the stuff was going to be even and going in the right direction. But now when I lift this up, what you're going to see is I've got the 2 full lines in the middle, but then on the sides I had the partial lines. I've really zoomed in here so you can see how that little bit of the straight line, you can see it peeking out into that circle. Those straight lines are what I'm using to line everything up. And that allows me to mix and match. I can put whichever line I want wherever I want it. I can even use part of it, not all of it. I have a lot of flexibility with this so that as I'm creating it, I can create a unique pattern each and every time with this. So I want to put part of one of the big circles over there, and I can pick and choose where I want it to go simply by where I slide it to. So when you're playing with this stencil, the big thing to remember is you just line up the straight lines. As long as you've got those straight lines touching each other lined up, you will have things spaced wonderfully from side to side. And then you can choose and pick which circles you want to put where. You have the freedom to simply repeat the existing pattern that's on there, or to mix it up if you want to make it something different. Well, now you know a couple of different ways that you can use repeating patterns in your play. Next, I want to show you a little trick that you can do when you have both a stencil and a mask that really takes the pressure off. So I've got this tag that I made, paint pouring, and it's got all sorts of fun color on it, and I love it. So before I commit to this, I want to really check it out and see if things are going to work on it. I definitely like how the 3 ladies fit there, and by putting the stencil up against it, I can see what those patterns, those colors are going to look like when I'm all done. It's kind of like getting a preview before you commit with the paint. See, because when I put the stencil there, those silhouettes, that's what's going to be left when I use the mask. As I put that on there and I hold it in place, I'm going to put the paint all around them. I'm going to come in with black paint. I'm going to stencil all around those ladies, and what's going to be left is what's underneath them. And I know it's going to be good because I've already previewed it because I had a stencil in that exact pattern and shape. So when I lift off the mask, what I've got left behind are those silhouettes in bright, fun colors, those paints swirling around. I've got another tag here that I made paint pouring, except this time I'm not completely in love with the tag. This one, the colors are fun, but not the way the last tag was, where I really wanted to highlight or draw attention to a single part of it. For this one, I just wanted to become a wonderful background. I do want to fill in the entire tag, and you might notice that I didn't go all the way to the bottom of the stencil. It doesn't have a straight edge there at the bottom. I did that on purpose because this pattern doesn't line up perfectly. So by having that kind of soft edge and not the hard line that's the edge of the stencil, that lets me stencil right up to it, and it makes it look like it was some kind of pattern that lined up, but you and I both know it didn't line up at all. As promised in the beginning of the video, I'm going to walk you through step by step how to cut these apart if this is your first time ever cutting a stencil. When you get this stencil, it's going to have the 2 masks attached to it. So the very first time that you use it, you'll need to just cut them out using something like a craft knife or a sharp pair of scissors. You just need to cut them out once to separate them apart, and then you'll have those pieces as well as all of the ATC stencils. So let's dive into cutting this apart. You can use scissors, you can use a paper trimmer. Both of them work wonderfully. It's about what's most comfortable for you. Now, I'm using a paper trimmer because I know with this one I'm going to get more of a straight cut. I've used scissors to do this, and I've used a paper cutter. Both ways work. For those of you that are great at cutting straight lines, scissors, you can probably get this exact same look with it. For people like me who have a hard time cutting straight lines, paper trimmers are rather handy when doing this. So here they are, cut into thirds. And by the way, you can absolutely leave them as thirds if that makes you happy. Or you can keep cutting on this and cut them into their individual ATC sizes. So here they are, all cut and trimmed up, and my sides are not all perfectly even. I didn't measure anything, I eyeballed it all, and should it happen that you want to make one side wider so that it's basically masked off a little bit more when you're stenciling and playing, you can use a piece of tape to do that. I've taken a piece of tape and put it on one edge of the stencil, And then I'm going to fold it over and stick it to the other side, basically widening up that frame that goes around it. I'm going to use some scissors and then I'm just going to trim off the excess. Now you can do this all the way around all four sides, or you can do it around any one side. The tape that I used was a repositionable artist tape, but could you use painter's tape, duct tape, masking tape, washi tape? Absolutely. Whatever you've got, you can put all the way around it. So you saw me put it on one side, but you repeat the process on all four sides, and then magically you've got a wider edge on all four sides if you want that. So here you can see the stencil in action when it has tape around all four sides. Works exactly like one that doesn't have that tape around it, except that I don't have to be quite as careful about the edges and still get a very crisp and clean look. Now this ATC stencil, this is my take on it, and other artists have created ATC size stencils also. You can find all of them over at StencilGirlProducts.com. Well, thanks so much for joining me for today's play. If you've been enjoying this video, I'd so appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button. That way you'll know as soon as I've got a new one out. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.